I win again! Oh, Gladys, I kick your ass. I think we can see who the real victor. I'm just saying, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I am pretty goddamn good at this game. It's like you're not even trying. Fucking coronavirus. Hello, I'm Harkin and welcome back to Harks Paints. It has been a while, hasn't it? In the spirit of being a nerd and the fact that we're in the middle of a viral pandemic where we can't really go outside, we can't communicate with people, and I can't even go to the shop without wanting to punch someone because they can't maintain a 2-meter distance. Fuck this! Sorry about that. So yes, in the spirit of the fact that we're in the middle of a viral pandemic, I thought it was a good time to get back on my painting hype. As you can imagine, because I am just awful, I have a huge backlog at the moment. Ran a poll the other day, decided what I was going to paint, and here we are. I got into Necromunda last year, and I really friggin' like it, and I really friggin' like the models. So much so that I'm going to be painting some today. I'll be painting a House Goliath Forgeborn, which is the last one of the little pack of Forgeborn and Stimmers that I picked up last month. I really like these guys because they allow you to kind of experiment a little with different doodads of how you paint. I really like painting skin tones. These guys got a lot of muscles on show, so it's good for kind of shading in like the skin there and really getting down to the nitty gritty. I like the kind of industrial feel to them because these dudes are always working in like big foundries and forges all day, so I like to make them look a bit, rough and ready. And I'm going to pass that on to you. You can do with it what you like. Let's have some fun. I always start off with the flesh tone for this, and for this I just go with a nice base of Bugman's Glow. I basically just try to layer up as much as possible as I go, but I start with a nice dark tone as a base and then go progressively lighter and work in a number of washes as I go. Next, I'm going to do the armor plates. Now, the way that I start my armor plates off is I do a nice layer of squig orange. I know that with all of them it's yellow, but orange is just a good base color to work in yellow, I suppose, rather than just going from stark black. If you're ever working with yellows, I personally prefer to work with a different primer. As you can see here, I've used the Army Painter's black primer to do my miniature, which is part of the reason I'm using the squig orange, so I've got a good base to go off. But if you are going to use yellow in the future, I highly recommend going from a grey tone or a white tone for your primer, just to make life easier on yourself, really. Okay, and now on to Mechanicus Standard Grey. I use this for two things here. As you can see, I've got my base out as well. I'm going to use it as the primer layer for my base. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a good generous amount of the grey on my brush, and I'm just going to go to town on my base. I'm going to cover the whole surface. I'm going to be going over it with a number of washes and different bits and bobs, but we're just going to deal with this first because I like to have my bases usually done in bulk, especially these Zone Mortalis ones because they're quite easy to do. But just for the sake of the tutorial, I'll show you how I do my Zone Mortalis bases from scratch. But usually I would get about 3 or 4 of these and I would just do it once. Now I'm also, while I've got the plot open, going to do the trouser layer on my Goliath. So his trousers and his big forge gloves are going to be the same exact grey, and then we'll just touch them up a bit later. Make sure you're careful about getting the bits of the trousers that are just in between the boot and the straps on his shins. They can be a bit tricky sometimes, but you can always touch it up later if you go over it. Okay, still on the subject of the base, I've got some Abaddon Black here because I'm going to put a nice big hazard strip down my Zone Mortalis base. So I'm just going to use the Abaddon Black and I'm going to very gently go over the large flat strip of metal on the centre of my base. Okay, now let's go back to the flesh. So like I said, we've already got like a nice kind of dark Boogman's glow layer there. Now I'm going to take Kislev flesh and I'm going to very gently apply the paint over the muscles. Now I'm looking at the big surface areas, biceps, delts, that kind of thing. Any kind of muscle that would stick out, I'm going to go over it very gently because this is quite a strong contrasting paint. It goes well together, particularly when you blend it in with other paints and washes, but at the moment, as you can see, you need to be delicate or it's just going to look a little bit unusual at this stage. Okay, now for the iron bits. So again with the base, I'm just using lead belcher on this little valve bit here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, just a little bit of lead belcher on the exposed metal components of the model. Now there's quite a few of these, and later on down the line we are going to come back and touch back up certain areas, particularly on the armor plating, as there's some very thin aspects of the Goliath's armor where it has like an iron trim. But for now, I'm just going to take care of the big pieces, like on the arc welder. There's quite a lot of area on it where I just have like a stock metal and then shade it in later and go back over it. The same with the wiring that comes from the power pack and the large knee pads and the thigh pad that I've put on the forge plate. Okay, now for the boots and the belt buckles. For this, I'm just going to use Dryad bark as a starting point. You can see here I'm using a fine detail brush. That's just because the character has a set of goggles on. I don't want to do anything too crazy there, so I'm just going to very carefully go over and give him a nice kind of leather-strapped goggle. And then I'm just going to do the same with the belt buckles, the shin guard buckles, and his boots. Okay, now we're finally onto the yellow. So I've got Uriel yellow. What I do to this, I don't go too crazy. I want a tiny bit of that orange still showing through. So I've got a nice shade going on. So I'm removing most of the yellow from the brush, and I wouldn't say I dry brush it, but I nearly dry brush it. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Sorry guys. get rid of most of it off your brush, okay? You want to see a little bit of that orange coming through. You want that kind of hardy, like radioactive, out there, bright tone. It's that kind of yellow, but you want a tiny bit of orange still there. We want these guys to look worn and lived in, so you don't want them to just be a bright neon, I've gone to a rave yellow. We want more of a hazard sign yellow, so to speak. You know, the kind of thing you'd expect to see if you were to go to a factory or if you were to go on a building site. Something that screams, be careful, you're working with like powerful equipment, or a brick might land on your head. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm coming back over now with the iron. They have these little fiddly bits that are right on the edge of some of their armor plates that I like to touch back up after I've done the yellow with metal. So I'm just going over it with a high detail brush. Now we're going to do some of the reds as well. There's not much red going on with my model, but I want him to have nice, like, kind of red hair, so I'm using Gal Vorbak red for this. And the same with the trailing electrical cable that is on the arc welder. You might have noticed the quality went up, and that's because we had problems with the DSLR. So now we're using the C100. We won't make that mistake again. Apologies for the grain. And now it's time to get some washes in. Now what I really like about when I do my Goliaths is I can kind of just get messy with a lot of this. I'm using Reikland Flesh Shade, and honestly, you can use it on both the muscles and the yellow parts. It's a really good shader for yellows, I find. So I liberally apply this all over the armor, the power pack, most of the arc welder where it's yellow, and of course his skin. Okay, so while my Goliath is drying, I'm going to go back to my Mortalis base. Earlier, I put on a couple of Uriel yellow strips onto the hazard line, but now I'm going to go over the metal. I'm using Celestra Grey, and I'm just going to take an old starter brush and dry brush over the surface areas just to give it a bit more texture now. It doesn't need to be anything massive, just need to bring out some of the aspects of it. Once I've done that, I take my Abaddon Black and a sponge, and I'm going to get off most of the excess, and then I'm just going to stipple over the grey-white areas. This is just to make the surface look a bit more chipped and used, and, you know, like somebody's been running around on it for hundreds of years, like in Necromunda, because nothing changes. After I do that, I'm going to use the same, but with lead belcher, and I'm just very gently going over the surface to make it look chipped and metallic. Now I'm going to go over the same grey and metal areas, ignoring the hazard strip, with some Nuln Oil just to give it a little bit of texture, and then I'm going to leave that to dry. Now while my base is drying, I'm going to go back to my model, and I'm going to get the trousers, the boots, and all of the metal areas and just hit it with the Nuln Oil, and I'll leave the model to dry. Now I'm going to use a high detail brush on my Zone Mortalis base on the strips. I'm using Mournfang Brown, and I'm just picking out areas where the paint might be scratched, so I'm just doing very careful markings. Now to make it look more metallic, I'm going to go over the same scratches but with some Stormhost Silver. This will bring it out, and if I get it in between the lines of the Mournfang brown areas, it'll make it look more chipped and corroded and just a bit more lived in, really. Once that's done, I'm going to go down my hazard strip with some Agrax Earthshade. This is just to make it look more faded and a bit more knackered, really, and I'm just keeping that right there. While that's drying, I'm going to get some Rise of Rust, and I'm going to go over the metal and main components of my Mortalis base and just make it look a bit more rusted and weathered. Then I'm going to take some Rust Wash, and I'm just going to get a tiny bit of it, and I'm literally just going to go over the remaining surface areas of my base to make it look nice and rusty and old and horrible. Okay, so our model is now dried and we're ready to do the last bits of our Goliath Forgeborn, so let's crack on. So I'm going to take the Celestra Grey again, and I'm going to dry brush over his trousers and over his gloves, just to bring it out and make a nice kind of light grey cloth. You can touch this up with a little bit of white if you want, but for the purpose of this video I'm just going to stick with my Celestra. Now I'm going to go back over with the Uriel yellow. A lot of the metal, but the yellow metal now looks quite faded. So I'm literally just going over the corners. I'm not taking too much on my brush. I'm just getting all of the edges just to make it look a bit more accented and make it stand out and really have that yellow pop. Now I'm going to go back over the skin. I'm using Flayed One Flesh, and the same exact thing that I did with my Kislev Flesh, I'm going to go over the areas where I would expect the muscle to be highlighted and accented, and I'm just going to apply very thin, careful layers so it doesn't look smudged, it doesn't blend in with the recesses of the muscle or the face tone or anything like that, and I'm just going to apply it until it looks, well, right, I suppose you could say. Once that's done, I'm going to go over my straps. There's a lot of straps right by the muscle, so you can expect a little bit of paint to go over those. I'm using Mournfang Brown again, and I'm just going to go over my belt buckles. However, I'm not going to use it on my boots, and we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm dry brushing Ushabti Bone onto the boots just to make them look a bit more dirty and weathered, definitely like they've been, you know, clobbered around in for quite a while. Now I'm going to take some Flesh Wash from the Army Painter. I'm going to get a good few drops in there, as it's quite a light, it's a very inoffensive Flesh Wash. It's literally just a final pass, and that's what we're doing here. This is our last pass, just to add kind of a bit of a skin lilac tone onto our dude. And as you can see, it gives him quite a nice little glow. I just find it really finishes off the job in terms of skin. Now, speaking of finishing off the job, let's go over that metal and make it look a bit chipped. So we're going to take the Stormhost Silver, we're going to go over our Goliath, and we're just going to go over the yellow metal areas very gently, get the corners, and just make it look a bit more utilised. I'll do the same exact thing here for the corners of the metal if any yellow's gone over, and also for boot clips and other areas of the metal. And there you have it, that's how I paint my Goliaths. I want to do more Necromunda stuff in the future, which actually coincides with what you guys have been asking for on Instagram. Took a poll recently, took a big list of everything that I'm going to be painting in the next round of Harks Paints videos, which are going to actually be the Corpse Grinder Cultists, just like these ones that I was fighting today with old Gladys. Ain't that right, Gladys? She don't talk much. Anyway, I'm going stir crazy, and if you want me to keep my sanity for a moment longer because of this lockdown, you can like, comment and subscribe to my channel. And you can also check out my Instagram and Facebook, because, you know, social media, I'm a YouTube hack, I've got to have it or I can't talk to you. So if you want to get in touch, use any of those avenues of communication. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Unless, you know, I finally lose it in that time. I've got Gladys, but things are getting weird, okay?